And I have today two very special guests from two different sides of the world, really, in a way, of the coast at least. So I'm in New York, Colin is in British Columbia, and Tom is in Colorado. And today we'll be talking about how to turn wicked problems into massive opportunities. And by that, we don't mean your kids. What we mean is something completely different, which we'll talk about in a second. Generating ownership in world-changing ventures at founder-level valuations. And I will, before I say good morning here, maybe a quick couple of words about our guest today. So, Tom, on the right-hand side, co-founder and CEO of XGenesis. Tom is co-founder and CEO. He has founded and run 9 startups and returned over $1 billion to investors. Notable companies include NETdelivery that was acquired, Service Metrics that was acquired, and Latis Networks that was also acquired. At Techstars, mentor since 2009 and advisor to hundreds of founders and CEOs over more than 2 decades. Tom has also been an angel investor in over 35 companies. He's an advisory board member of the Global Startup Studio Network and has served on numerous boards and advisory boards. So that's Tom. Couple of words about Colin here, who's also the co-founder and COO of XGenesis. He's a 3-time founder, operator, and startup advisor and consultant. His experience touches virtually every area of startup execution, including operations, product, finance, team, marketing, and business development. He previously co-founded Lumatic that was acquired, and he has worked with dozens of other startups and organizations as an advisor or consultant, spanning clean power, addiction treatment, affordable childcare, workforce development, and more. So, good morning, Colin and Tom, and thank you for joining us today. I would love to hear a little bit about XGenesis and what you guys are doing. I have the bio here, but I'll let you do the rundown about that and take it from there. So a little bit about the XGenesis, about yourselves, maybe about your team, and then a couple of words about what you do and we'll...
So let me kick this off, Danny, by saying that Carlin and I met a long time ago. We were both actively involved in Techstars. Carlin was the CEO of a Techstars company, and we met over 10 years ago when I was a mentor in that context. And Carlin was amazing then. He's become more amazing still. So we're able to do what we do because of what he brings to the table as COO. He's just been extraordinary. We reconnected some 4 years ago and have been since working diligently to pull together what it is we do as XGenesis. XGenesis, by the way, is a startup studio. But it's a startup studio with a powerful and meaningful difference. So for the benefit of those who may not know what startup studios are.
If I can just interrupt you, because you shared your screen and there's blank there. So while you're speaking, I think it's just better that we'll see you. And when you guys go to the slides, then we'll go there. Sorry to interrupt you.
So you don't get to see me when I share my screen. It's not in the background.
We see you, but very, very small. You know, this one we see you smiling and we see the trees behind you. And
I'm good small too.
Sorry, you were just explaining how you guys are different and what you do at XGenesis.
So let me begin by saying what startup studios are so that we're clear about that. I'm in the advisory board of the Global Startup Studio Network, and there are hundreds now of startup studios around the world. What that vantage point has given me is some sense about how powerful startup studios can be in supporting the entrepreneurs who actually want to create new ventures and want the kind of support that any experienced entrepreneur would want as they do what they do. So startup studios are powerful for entrepreneurs, but they're powerful for investors. So a couple of things that you should know about them. The first thing is that They're a way to create new ventures in parallel, to create multiple ventures at once. That's what they do. The second thing you should know is that when, as an investor, you're invested in a startup studio, you're taking an equity stake in the new ventures that are to be created at that founder's level of cost. So there's an extraordinary uptick in value for successful companies that come through startup studios. And Carlin will say more about this later. So it's important that we talk about studios and what they do. Studios help entrepreneurs get what they need from a process to create a new venture faster, more efficiently, more effectively, build value at speed. That's what they do. And what we do that's so materially different is this. We focus the attention of the entrepreneurs that want to create a new venture. This is before they have a venture. So this is pre-idea. We focus their attention on those wicked problems in the world that can give rise to value creation at the intersection of impact and ROI. That's an important piece of what we do. So our entrepreneurs are keen to do that. We bring them in and we support them. And the second thing that we do in this context is we take an equity stake in each of the new ventures created, which is why LPs invested in X Genesis get a stake in these companies at such wonderful valuations, really, but also get to support this process as we go forward. You'll learn more about this as we continue the conversation.
So basically, instead of a normal group that would get to see an interesting company, you come before the company stage to somebody who you think has the right tools because he's a successful entrepreneur. You come and say, hey, there is this problem going on that we've identified, which we think would be very interesting to solve. We think it's an interesting opportunity. Why don't you do this? And then it starts ground up, and you guarantee that he'll get some investment capital as well if he's willing to take the project.
So that's quite right. I'll say just a little bit more connected to this. We're doing what we do at such a scale. Well, the plan is to create 100 plus new ventures over the course of the next 3 years. That's a big deal in terms of the mix. So we're learning at speed. Our entrepreneurs are learning at speed. We're plugging them into a larger community that understands the kinds of wicked problems that we put on the table. And by the way, those wicked problems live in domains like health, in learning and work, and climate change and water. And the catalytic community, that's what we call it, that we plug these entrepreneurs into, really is a kind of secret sauce element for us. That and a few other really key things that we'll get to. So we're plugging entrepreneurs into that so that they can learn and get up to speed really quickly in a domain that they may be familiar with, but may not be familiar with at all. So we mix entrepreneurs with great entrepreneurial experience who have experience in a domain with those entrepreneurs who don't have an experience in that domain. And that creates additional opportunities for value creation, which is powerful for both the entrepreneur and for investors.
And that basically answers my next question, which is what's the difference between a startup studio model and an accelerator or an early stage fund? So that's the major difference, that they come with already companies they saw and believe in, while you create it from scratch.
Yeah, so this is a great thing to understand, right? So I've been a mentor in the Techstars program since it started, literally from the beginning. And I love what they've done with the place, so to speak. And Brad Feld is a dear friend and was an investor in 3 of my ventures over time. And Brad's a founder in Techstars. So what Techstars and Y Combinator, and for that matter, pretty much all of the examples of accelerators do is they look for really promising entrepreneurs who have really young companies. They're really early stage, but they don't accept somebody into their program who hasn't yet created a venture. So if the venture doesn't exist, if there's no team whatsoever, if they don't know what they're going to do yet, they're not qualified to participate in an accelerator. In our case, though, Denny, you're an experienced entrepreneur. We will find you, know that you plan to create a new venture, and we'll say, Denny, don't create just any new venture. Create something that's extraordinarily powerful, that can be turned into massive market opportunity. And here's the thing I want to emphasize before I pass the baton back to you, Denny. It's this. Look, the wicked problems that we've described, those are occasions for turning problems into a significant opportunity through time. That's exactly what we do. That's our focus in what we do. But for investors, for those on the call who are listening in this context, I'll emphasize this. It may have been true that in the past, you could focus entirely on ROI and not have to give any thought to the kinds of wicked problems that we're talking about here. But the truth is that those wicked problems now represent some of the largest future opportunities from an investment perspective. And if you're not allocated in a way that takes advantage of some of these opportunities, even at the earliest of stages, you're missing the boat. You're missing an opportunity. So that's why this invitation to the investors who are on the call here is so important. There's something new here, something powerful.
If I'm an entrepreneur that did cyber, don't they normally want to do the same thing in the next venture?
So some entrepreneurs do. They want very much to do exactly the same thing, or to stand on the shoulders of the experience they have and extend what they learned previously. That's surely true. It's by no means all of the entrepreneurs. So let me just give you an example. Cheryl Kelland, who came into our program in 2015, one of the first programs, she had some experience working with a product company, a wristband that would work specifically for women to monitor athletic performance. No real experience in health. She wanted that experience in health. She wanted to learn about it, to engage and to connect, and she created Apostrophe Health. She raised 16+ million. That company's exited in just the last couple months. Frank Ricotta started Burst IQ, a blockchain company that delivers healthcare data securely. And Frank was the first company formed through what we did back in 2015. So that blockchain company has now grown significantly. Frank is well known in the blockchain space. It's a powerful piece. And then Spencer Hutchins, Concert Health in 2016. While he had some VC experience and some health experience, he certainly didn't have experience in this area. He realized that there was this bifurcation of health and mental health, and that bifurcation really prevented independent physicians from delivering a mental health solution to their patients and deprived them of the revenue stream they would get if they were actually serving the whole patient. So Spencer has grown this thing, raised north of 14 million, operates in 8+ states, will serve their 19,000th customer. They have 170 employees, 140 health or mental health professionals. I mean, it's an extraordinary success story. And this happened from somebody who came in and didn't yet know what they wanted to do or what they were going to do, and wasn't deeply experienced in this specific area before they encountered us. So we're proud of what's happened with those entrepreneurs, and that's what we're doing now at scale.
Thank you. And how do you create value for your investors? How is X Genesis startup studio model is unique and creates value for the investors, really?
So, Carlin, why don't I pass the baton here to you? You have many things to say about this.
So there are really a few pieces here. The first, obviously, is the opportunity to participate at that very early stage. So essentially choosing the horse, the jockey, and the race, and giving investors a way to be a part of that on day one, the day that venture is formed, versus later on, and to benefit from the much lower valuations at that point. The second one is this is deal flow. So in some cases, for those investors who care, there's a meaningful connection here to a number of opportunities later on to participate in rounds of companies that are going on to do pretty amazing things. And then the last one here is for the right investors. So for those investors who care about aligning their portfolios with their values and putting their money in places that are creating a positive impact, this is that. This is a way to invest in companies early on, not only that are tackling large problems in the market sense, but that are tackling some of literally the most meaningful problems and challenges that we face in the world today.
Thank you. Now, why did you choose to focus on wicked problems? Does that put you at an advantage or disadvantage relative to other studios?
Actually, an extraordinary advantage. And let me say why that's true. Wicked problems, by the way, is a real thing. We didn't invent the term. It comes from a paper, Dilemmas in a General Theory of Planning. And we could geek out about all this, but we don't have to. Just know that wicked problems arise in the context of great complexity. And what we've now seen is that many of the kinds of things that we talk about as wicked problems, the climate and water issues, the health issues, and so forth, those things are now represent in a really powerful and really significant way what ESG is focused on in the investment space. So Larry Pink has understood climate to be a wicked problem for a very, very long time, and he's not alone. I mean, we're now seeing many ESG-oriented funds, points of focus, because these problems have not been addressed, have built up. And so by turning the attention of entrepreneurs who will create their next big thing to those kinds of wicked problems and helping them understand how important it is to do the kind of due diligence and to have the kind of leverage as they go at these big problems, we can give them a leg up. We can give them an unfair advantage as they do what they do. And that's what we're excited about, right? There really is no better time to do what we're doing than right now. The powerful thing is that studios have matured to support this. The powerful thing is those problems are now acknowledged, whether it's COVID on the one hand and a collection of pandemic and health related issues, or climate on the other. You can just keep going. You now understand that opportunities are profound in those spaces. So wicked problems turned out to be really material. There's one other thing I'll say about it though, Denny, and that's that when we look at the largest market cap companies ever to exist in the world, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, and so forth. One of the things that we see is that too few of those companies and their entrepreneurs have really focused on these kinds of challenges. Elon Musk is the exception. I mean, Tesla really does represent someone who's understood a wicked problem and understood it to be a market opportunity. We really want to see more entrepreneurs create world-class and world-changing companies, and we want them to be supported by investors who are aligned with those ideals and intentions. So that's where we're headed.
I have a question here. Do you have some examples of failures to speed up some ventures after 4 years? And do you have a diagnostic?
Some examples, let me make sure I heard you properly.
Do you have some examples of failures to speed up some ventures after 4 years? And do you have a diagnostic? Yeah.
So one thing that we've learned is it truly is important that someone have enough experience when they come into what we do, because we haven't built this to support the entrepreneur who's doing it first time. So the less experience an entrepreneur has, the more difficult it is for us to make up that difference in the context of what we do. Now, through time, that might change. In fact, it's likely that we will put in place mechanisms to support entrepreneurs who are earlier and earlier in what they do. And that's something that we value, because it lets us bring the diverse voices and perspectives that need to be there from entrepreneurs in the context of these kinds of problems. But that's a thing. Carlin, do you want to jump in and speak to this? I've got some other examples too, but
the first thing I'll say is that we have constant failures, but we have them before a venture is created, and in a way, that's the whole point of the model. So that's the first thing I'll say, right? We work with entrepreneurs in a kind of discovery and validation process where they are coming up with ideas, discarding them, working on something for a month or two, realizing it's not the right direction, pivoting. And there is never a cheaper time in the life cycle of that venture to fail than before it's created. So we actually put an incredible amount of value on failure and failing fast, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with as a concept. We've also had failures of ventures that have been created. What I'll say is that the 12 ventures that we've supported the creation of, the vast majority of those are still operating. So we've only had a very small number of failures, but we have had a couple.
I just want to riff on one thing that Carlin said, and that's the notion here that it's part of the design of the model that failure is built in and expected. That he's said this, and it's absolutely true. We're experimenting, and these entrepreneurs are experimenting. But think about this. Would you rather fail after you've built a team that's 50, 70, 150, 200 people, or would you rather discover that the model that you're looking at through the test was killed before you actually hired anybody? You work your way through our process and can actually see that this isn't going to work. You can't validate this. It's invalidated in the context of the process. That's what you want. That's what investors should want.
Thank you. Now, back to our the questions I have here. How many ventures do you expect to support over the next few years? You mentioned that a little bit in the beginning, that you're talking about 100?
Yeah, I know this seems almost impossible. It's not. Here's how this works. First, we have a model that we now know we can scale. So we've done what we've done over the course of 6 years. We're now coming into a situation where by building out the team, the platform that we use to do what we do, we can actually move at greater speed, but also with greater breadth. One of the things that helped us immensely, and I think you're aware of this too, Denny, is COVID and its impact. So we didn't, in the beginning, do anything except in person. So we brought people to us and they all gathered. We'd have 500 people in an audience and that would kick things off and we do what we did. Now we're able to do what we do virtually. And we've created a context for doing this that allows us to plug entrepreneurs into a much larger group of what we call a catalytic community. And that's comprised of validators. So these are subject matter experts with deep domain knowledge and experience in the sectors that we've described. So health, learning and work, climate change, and water. And these validators are there to support our entrepreneurs in both validating and invalidating formulations of the problem and of the potential business model and solution, something that would be taken to market. So validators do that. And then we have specialists who are, in effect, the kind of early stage startup team you would want as an entrepreneur. We supply our entrepreneurs with this, so you don't have to go out and hire people or do whatever, and our specialists provide that kind of support to each of the entrepreneurs who participates in the program. So part of the reason we're able to do what we do at that kind of speed and at that kind of scale is the catalytic community that I've just described, but there's more. We have a really refined process for how we take entrepreneurs through what they need to know and understand. And I think Carlin needs to say some things about this, but I'll touch base on it here. Our model is fundamentally focused on the entrepreneur finding a founder opportunity fit. And here's the magic in that. The notion here is that entrepreneurs don't understand this often, but it's really true that they're investors. Entrepreneurs are investing the next chapter of their lives in the new venture that they will create. And what they lack is an established due diligence process. If they could do what financial investors do and vet lots of possibilities and kill the things that don't make any sense and go forward with those that do, they'd have a much better track record than they do. So we support them in this, but we're able to do it at that early stage before there's actually a venture in place. So we're doing it when things can be really lean, things can move really quickly. And just like we said, we can fail fast and inexpensively in a bunch of areas. We can also spin things up very fast. And we rely on our entrepreneurs, this catalytic community, and the process that we built to be able to do this. So 100 new ventures over the next 3 years, returning to investors based on the equity we take in each of these companies, returning to investors over the next 10. So that's how this looks.
And so you answered that obviously, but is there anything else you can add about how you support the entrepreneurs? How do you help them create the value beyond your contacts and giving them actually the opportunity itself, right? I mean,
yeah, Carlin.
So I'll actually do a quick screen share here. And you'll just have to confirm that you can see this, Denny.
We do.
Great. So we use this bow tie diagram sometimes when we speak about where we sit in the entrepreneurial journey. The middle of the bow tie is the moment that a new venture is created. Everything on the right side of the bow tie is what comes next. So it's all the things you're familiar with. It's accelerators, product, funding, growth, scale. eventually perhaps an exit. And the thing to acknowledge here is that the vast majority of the startup ecosystem over the last 25 years has been focused on what happens on that right side of the bow tie. And the left side of the bow tie, what happens before a venture is created, the process an entrepreneur goes through on their journey to decide what they want to do next, has been largely neglected. And really the key insight that XGenesis is built on is that everything that happens on the left side of the bow tie before a venture is created, before there's a team, a product, or even an idea, can dramatically impact that venture's chances of success. So really what we've created here is a powerful de-risking mechanism, and that de-risking provides value to entrepreneurs because, like Tom described, the entrepreneurs themselves are investors in a sense, and it also provides value to investors and to XGenesis itself. So we match entrepreneurs with the right opportunities during that discovery phase that you see at the beginning. We're providing them with extensive research in the domains that they're investigating, connections to a community of subject matter experts from foundations, nonprofits, for-profits, government, et cetera. And then in the validation process, we're helping to guide them through some in-depth vetting and validation so that by the time a venture is created, we're sure and they're sure that there's a customer, there's a market, that the solution can be built, and that it's something that the world actually needs. So really, this is a de-risking engine, if you will, so that by the time an entrepreneur makes that decision about the thing that they want to do next, they have an incredibly high degree of confidence, not just that it can be successful, but also that it's the right business for them, that it's a good match for who they are, what they care about in the world, and what they want to create and have their legacy be.
Thank you. What are some examples of the types of entrepreneurs you support and the companies they have created?
So I mentioned earlier 3 of them, and I like to use them as examples, but I'm going to maybe take things a step further. So the companies that are being created are being created in the context of the themes that we talked about. So the entrepreneurs that we're looking for, number one, have to have significant startup experience. By and large, we look for those who've started ventures previously and have had at least one success, but we're absolutely willing to look at an entrepreneur who can demonstrate to us that they have the capacity to articulate a vision internally and externally, that they're able to raise the necessary capital, and that they're able to recruit and bring aboard and retain a top talent. If those things are present and we can see that there's a meaningful connection between their aspirations, what they want to do, what they want to build, if they're going to build something at venture scale, and they're open to finding their success at that intersection of ROI and impact, those are our people. That's what we look for. And Carlin can say some things about where we find them.
So just a couple of sort of more recent examples, since Tom shared some of the companies that are much further along. Just an example, a guy named Charles Korteng, he's actually in Rwanda, started a venture that got incredible attention on the international stage, presented at the UN, a whole bunch of things of that nature, exited that, was thinking about what he wanted to do next. He participated with us in a program that took place early this year and is now exploring a venture that helps farmers to actually quantify the benefit of their regenerative farming practices and essentially mint carbon credits via a carbon marketplace, and actually turn those regenerative farming practices into a direct source of revenue, which really changes the incentives game in terms of adoption. So that's the kind of venture we like to see. Daniel Hoyos, actually Colombia-based, working on a really fascinating project for a replacement for plastic packaging developed from seaweed. There's a whole bunch of these kinds of examples. In terms of how we find these entrepreneurs, it's really a combination of inbound and outbound. We get a number of referrals from entrepreneurs who have worked with us in the past and who had a great experience. We've even had repeat entrepreneurs at this point, entrepreneurs who worked with us once and come back and want to work with us again. We also have a number of channels. We mentioned Techstars. We have a close relationship with them. We get referrals from them, as well as other communities of entrepreneurs. And then we do direct outreach. So when an entrepreneur has an exit, we find them sometimes via LinkedIn or Crunchbase. We reach out, we start a conversation and assess whether it's a good fit. There are a few things that we look for that really matter to us in terms of selection. So obviously we select for experience. We look for entrepreneurs who have started a company. At least sometimes it's 3 or 5 or more companies that they've started. But we also look for the ability to be self-reflective and their communication skills. And then we care about their ability to communicate a compelling vision, both internally and externally, their ability to attract a team, their ability to raise the necessary capital to get the company off the ground. So there are a whole bunch of things that we use to really choose the entrepreneurs that ultimately are the best fit to what we do.
I have to ask you a question. We're building, it's a secret, but no longer, I guess. We're building a group of very high net worth individuals that would meet together. You can call it a club, but that's redundant. But the idea is that because we're originally from Israel, which is startup nation, so we're very tech oriented, we thought, we're seeing interesting folks that other groups don't. Many of them are New Wealth, which are the folks you guys speak to, those entrepreneurs. And what we found out that, even when you look at wealth and you look at old wealth and new wealth, which are completely different kinds of wealth and different mental state, I feel that when you speak about a tech in general, and of course, tech entrepreneurs are different than any other kind of entrepreneur, right? Real estate or whatever, they never rest. This is what I always tell people, these guys never rest. It doesn't matter how much money they just made, they will look for the next venture, which is exactly what you guys are doing. I met, I think, one in my entire life guy that maybe didn't go for this next venture immediately after the last one. But I have a theory that's probably going to burn many bridges right now, that there's the traditional wealth, which are, it's funny to call them traditional tech, sorry. And then there's the blockchain DeFi paths, which are flying somewhere in space. There are different mindset, right? And, that's one of the things we thought about. We're also meeting a lot of these guys, and if they only would collaborate, it would be great. So when you're talking about entrepreneurs, right, and you're seeking the right mindset, the right this and that, have you ever tried to bring some of the folks that's been in that crazy world, or at least crazier? That was a long way to ask a very simple question.
So yes, and I'll take that one. I think Tom was fixing his green screen.
I was.
I think he was like, is he really asking that? Okay, sorry.
So the short answer is yes. And to be fair, I think we see a spectrum of different folks, right? So there's some who come to us after very large exits, and they really want to make this next one something meaningful where they can have a positive impact and really fulfill perhaps some values that they hold that although the previous venture may have been incredibly lucrative, maybe it didn't check all of those boxes in terms of what they wanted to really see themselves as creating in the world and the impact that they would want to have long term. So we see some of those folks. We also see those who have worked on companies perhaps much longer term. So we see the high tech, high growth entrepreneurs. We also see entrepreneurs who have worked on something for 20 or 25 years and built that up over time and perhaps bootstrapped it into something quite successful. And in the moments after they leave that, it's a big change, right? We actually love working with entrepreneurs in those kind of pivotal transition moments where they're really examining who they are and what they want to do next. That's really our sweet spot.
I'm getting some questions here on my WhatsApp regarding the minimum investment and all of that and ROI, but we'll get to it in a second. What I'll quickly mention is that you guys obviously, talk about something very interesting, because family offices care about impact investing way more than anybody else I know, because they can do good and make money and do good. And the same with just what you mentioned, a fellow Canadian, Anthony Diorio, which is a very, very nice guy, the co-founder of Ethereum, right? He's from Toronto. And then when I spoke with him, he said, listen, I want to sell everything I have right now and focus on doing good, which by the way, gave me this idea I just mentioned to you, because I thought if he would speak to Silverstein that also wanted to do good, they could do way more together. So you're actually touching a very interesting point, because many entrepreneurs as well are now like, okay, I've done my share, I'm good, but how can I do something meaningful, right? Beyond, just making so great point. So why do you experience, I don't know how to read basically when I think about it. Why do experienced entrepreneurs choose to work with you?
Yeah. So I'll say something, and I'm going to pass it to Carlin here too. You heard at the beginning that I've started 9 ventures over a period of time. I mean, today, for example, I saw a LinkedIn post that showed that one of my co-founders on the board, extraordinary entrepreneur, Raj Bhargava, started Jump Cloud. That's now valued at $2.6 billion. Another friend, Mark Frank, did Sondermind. Still other friends did Dispatch Health. So I'm seeing all of those kinds of things. But here's the thing about why entrepreneurs pick us, even if they're in those rarefied kind of atmospheres. The entrepreneurs who choose us understand something about the opportunity cost, right? I'll just say this, after having started 9 ventures, I have both extraordinary success and failure in context. There isn't one of those failures where I didn't wish that an Genesis existed to support me in the context of what it is I was doing. It would have been an extraordinary thing. And extraordinary in that it would have helped me think through, and this is something we do with entrepreneurs. There's a concept, a construct called Ikigai that some of you may have heard, Ikigai. And in that context, you're really wanting, as you invest your life in your next thing, to begin thinking about what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. Too often, entrepreneurs have discovered too late that they've left out one of those elements, something material. And if they do, they find they come up short. For example, if you leave out the what the world needs dimension of this, your success can feel pretty hollow. We try to dissuade entrepreneurs, for example, from creating the next dog walking app. We don't probably need a whole lot of new dog walking apps, or for that matter, a collection of other things that entrepreneurs get lured into, sucked into doing. Nothing against ROI. We don't want to see success defined in impact only terms. And we don't want to see success defined in ROI only terms. We're really about the intersection and connection of those things. So experienced entrepreneurs pick us to help focus on those things that could yield that for the next chapter of their lives. I mean, that's the win for them.
And how do you, sorry, you wanted to add?
So I'll just plus one to what Tom said. We're building the thing that we wish we had in the past ventures that we had started, the process that we wish we had access to, and the level of sophistication and nuance in that process that very few individual entrepreneurs are able to develop, again, because they're only doing this once every few years. The last thing I'll just mention here is that helping entrepreneurs to make better decisions it just leads to massive efficiency and time gains. And the research, the resources we provide, and the incredibly powerful catalytic community all contribute to that process that allows them to make better decisions and make fewer mistakes, and to fail early and fast versus later on once a venture is being created.
And how do you match them? I mean, you see so many different folks, different backgrounds, different mindsets. How do you match them to the opportunities?
Go ahead, Carlin.
So this question, I'll sort of turn around and say, we don't match them to the opportunities at all, or I should say rarely. So every now and then we'll have a project or an idea that we think is compelling, and we'll go out and look for an entrepreneur. But really, we're far more in the business of helping entrepreneurs themselves to match themselves to the right opportunity. So we give them the tools and access to a wide array of perspectives and problem areas, and then a process for diving into those and dissecting them and understanding them in a way that allows them to ultimately decide what the best fit for them is, and to identify those areas where there's a market opportunity and where they can do something that's compelling and meaningful. So really, this is not so much us intervening or pulling any strings from up above, and it's far more about supporting the entrepreneurs themselves to go through the process and ultimately find the thing that's the best fit for them personally.
And how do you find the entrepreneurs? I mean, where do you find them? I mean, you spread the word, people hear about you, I get that, but then how do you read a lot of newspapers, you follow websites, what do you do?
So all of the above. It's that and more. I mentioned referrals. Like you would expect in this space, we see more and more inbounds over time, right? As more entrepreneurs have been through the program, refer this out. We get referrals from partners as well. And then we do the outreach, the direct outreach too. That's a critical aspect of this. We also don't really see this as an application process, right? So this is an invitation kind of thing where we find you or you find us. We have a few conversations. We really get a sense of each other and assess whether an invitation makes sense.
I neglected, Denny, to mention something earlier that I'll bring in now. We have a class of sources of support for us that we call venture advisors. And our advisors are amazing. These are people who've started many companies previously. They're often venture capitalists. There's a wonderful group of folks that have committed 3 to 5 hours a month over the next 3 years and have put skin in the game. So they have a vested interest in the success of the companies that are created through what we do. And those venture advisors are a source of referral too. So they can help introduce us to those who would be a good fit for programs and really are attuned to the entrepreneurial community. One of the venture advisors, for example, is someone I mentored in Techstars, I think just before Carlin. Their company was acquired by Pandora, Next Big Sound, and then they were acquired in turn. And Alex is a great example of a venture advisor who's really been steeped in the venture space and done what he's done for a long time. The CEO of ShotSpotter, Ralph Clark. I mean, I could just go through a whole list. The head of Energize Colorado, Wendy Lee, lots and lots of really significant players in this venture advisor group, and they help us find entrepreneurs as well.
And then how much we're getting now to the point that we want to understand better, which is how much are you raising? What's the minimum investment? And how will you use those funds?
Yeah, so this is an $11 million raise. That is a $500K minimum, and it's a direct investment into an operating entity. So that's important that you understand. The operating entity is X Genesis Studio One LLC. That entity will operate over the next 3 years, generate that portfolio of 100 plus ventures, and then return over the following 7 or so years. The return profile here is really what you would expect to see from an early stage venture fund. So somewhere in the range of 5X, but you get those same returns while supporting ventures that are tackling some of the most important problems that exist in the world today. We also provide access to pro rata investment rights. So I mentioned this earlier. If that's your thing, you'll have the opportunity to put additional dollars to work in some of the individual companies. And then there's a 1X preference just to offer some additional basic protection to our investors. In terms of use of funds, the majority of that, so about 7 million or so out of the 11, goes to the team. So it's ramping up the team that supports all of this and helps us to scale. We also put some dollars directly to work in new ventures, however. So 25 to 50K into each new venture on the day it's formed.
And then, and how long, by the way, what's the holding period when somebody's investing with you?
So it's a deployment period, if you will, or sort of the equivalent to a fund deployment period of 3 years, followed by a 7-year holding period. So 10 years total.
And how much equity are you taking in the different companies? How does that work?
Yeah, so we take 15% equity in each venture. If you're mostly operating in the accelerator space, you'll look at that number and that'll look high. If you're familiar with startup studios, you'll look at that number and it'll actually look like a fantastic deal if you're an entrepreneur. Most studios might take 40 to 60% of each company, what we've found is that that's just not attractive to the best entrepreneurs out there. And our model, despite taking lower in each individual venture, actually generates more total ownership across the portfolio for the dollars we put to work than almost any other startup studio out there. So we're really efficient in that sense. We're able to deliver a huge amount of value to our entrepreneurs, but do it at an equity take that we think is really reasonable. So 15% in each venture.
So I think these are the main questions I had here. Maybe a couple of others. Geographical focus. Is there?
I missed that. Say it again, Denny. Sorry.
Geographical focus.
Oh, yes. So this is interesting. We once thought that scale for us would be about spinning up what we do in cities around the world. We'd start in the U.S. We'd occupy a place in the minds and hearts of entrepreneurs in all of the places you'd expect. And then COVID struck, and we realized that we actually could do what we do remotely. So you heard Carlin mention Charles, who's not in the US, he's in Africa. You've heard him mention Daniel, who's in Colombia. We had an entrepreneur participate in Canada in the most recent cohort. We had one of our startup specialists in Portugal. So we've now become global in terms of our focus. We really want to serve and support entrepreneurs who are in other parts of the world, not just in the US, and that's important. There's maybe another piece to this. Many of the kinds of challenges that we take on, climate is a good example, are so enormous, and the perspectives required really have us reaching across borders and boundaries and thinking very differently about how we might approach those problems. One of our entrepreneurs who was really in leadership positions in Rocky Mountain Institute for a long period of time is using blockchain and working through a process that might be a kind of nature's Nielsen, a definitive measurement that tokenizes how incentives would be created. So that kind of thing just doesn't want to be in a city or in a particular city or in a particular country. It's really the sort of thing that could live and should live throughout the world. So.
Question from someone here from Keith. How much do they, which is you, invest in the company from the money raised aside from their 25K to 50K that they put in for the 15%?
So the answer is from the operating company, that's it. So from the operating company, we put in 25 to 50K in each venture. However, next year, we'll be putting in place a side fund that'll make follow-on investments in the same ventures and participate in seed and Series A rounds for those ventures and take additional equity. But for the operating company, that's the investment.
Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, so how do you validate the ideas that you think would be successful? And by the way, where do you find them? How do you find the need, the problems? It takes an entrepreneur a lifetime to figure out, hey, I'm onto something. Like Uri Levin, Uri Levin, the founder of Waze, has been speaking at numerous events of ours, and he always wears the same shirt. I hope he has some copies of the same shirt, but at least it looks like the same shirt that says fall in love with the problem. How do you find the problems and how do you validate them?
So I love this question. First off, that catalytic community that we described is really a major source for us of identification of the problems and even how they might be shaped or framed. But we don't rest there. That's not enough. The entrepreneurs, the validators, the specialists, and even the venture advisors get involved in mixing it up to give shape to those problems so that they actually start to look like they could be something you could address. There are problems for which no marketable solution is likely to issue in the near term. There are problems like that. We know those kinds of problems. So you don't want to be a solution looking for a problem, but you also don't want to be that problem that doesn't really have a way to attach to market opportunity. So we're careful to make sure that we're focused on both of those dimensions of this. And we started with this notion of problem and possibility first. You saw that on the bow tie slide. That's sort of baked into who we are and what we do, our DNA. If we can find entrepreneurs who care enough about the problem to sacrifice in a way that they'll need to build a truly powerful venture, that's a win. That's a win not just for us and for our investors or for the entrepreneur. It's a win in the world. And that's what we care about. That's what we're about.
And in terms of validation, I'm not going to be saying anything here that will be new to anyone who's familiar with validation in the context of startups, but we really look to see dozens and dozens of conversations with potential customers, partners, and those in the space. So we want our entrepreneurs to be getting outside of their box and having those kinds of conversations and interviews early and often. But it's not just that. So really what we encourage is a kind of diverge converge, where an entrepreneur is spending a bunch of time in those kind of external conversations, making sure that they're not just in their own echo chamber and actually understanding the customer, falling in love with the problem and the customer rather than the solution. But then it's also about coming back and saying, okay, given what I've learned as an entrepreneur, do I still care? Is this still the right direction for me? Is it still a match for my skills, my background, what I want to do in the world? And that's just as important.
And then COVID, obviously you mentioned that brought you to be more global. Do you think it also brought more attention to anything to do with wicked problems now that people are maybe see it in their face, so unfortunately, in such a scope?
So Denny, maybe you can react to this too. Our keen awareness has been that the world isn't prepared to deal effectively with the kinds of problems that COVID and pandemics represent. We can see this pretty clearly. And what we're not able to do well and effectively in that context, we're also not able to do well and effectively in the context of climate and many of the other kinds of problems that we're talking about here. So what we are keen to do is recognize a role for the entrepreneur in this context and a role for capital, but to recognize that this is a bigger thing than just that. So the global nature of this is important, but also the diverse set of perspectives and understandings about things, and a way to find a path to a collective action that's really being driven by the right set of incentives, really helping people to make wise and important and effective choices around these kinds of things. We can do better than we've done with COVID. I don't think there's anybody who would dispute that what happened in the world in response to the pandemic has not been an optimal response. And I think that we've seen all kinds of places where entrepreneurs played roles in the context of this pandemic, but there will be others, there will be more. And climate is similar in the sense that we don't have a well understood path, either in the context of adaptation or mitigation, or the full panoply or range of things that might be brought to bear, in part through what entrepreneurs do, certainly in terms of what nations do, and also in terms of how individuals think about what they can contribute in context. So we're on the entrepreneur side in this, and on the capital side in this, looking for the best way to make sure that the deployment of those resources really gives effect to a solution that is of enormous benefit in the world and drives ROI to the investor.
And then maybe just another question here: what role does the network and community plays in your process?
Yeah, so it's foundational. This notion of catalytic community for us is a thing that really has been championed by a collection of others over a period of time, but never really delivered in an effective way in the case of these kinds of problems and challenges for the entrepreneur, for the benefit of the entrepreneur. So The network that you see with Y Combinator, the network that you see in the context of Techstars, the network that you see across the entrepreneurial community is meaningful. But that network is limited and isn't as powerfully plugged into a collection of other validators, subject matter experts. So that piece of things both sources problems and gives us some understanding about, well, where we might go in crafting a solution that could be delivered to market. But it also connects us to people and to talent and organizations and institutions that can be supportive of the entrepreneur in the things that we do. That's been huge for us. We have just an amazing amount of goodwill built up through time in terms of what happens with that network.
Thank you. So this session is being recorded, of course. So those of you who didn't catch it can see it later on, and all the contact information will be sent to you. Colleen and Tom, is there anything else that you would like to add to this point?
Well, just the Wizard of Oz quote sort of changed, pay no attention to the curtain behind the man. That there's that little bit in the recording. So just pass by that.
And just thank you, Denny. Thank you for everyone who was here. Appreciated some of the questions, and look forward to connecting if this seems at all interesting.
Yeah, of course. And so thank you so much for that. And I will just quickly tell everybody what's going on with us next week. So just so you know, on the 19th, I have an interesting discussion. Actually, is it on the 19th? Yeah, on the 19th, which is next Tuesday. I'll be speaking with somebody very unique, not a normal guest, I would say. Kane Roberts, who was one of the most well-known guitar players in the 80s. He's mostly known for playing with Alice Cooper. And if you had a Jewish mother or had a long-haired guitar player, that would be him. Never did drugs, never drank, and just worked on becoming very fit. If you remember him, he looks like Sylvester Stallone in the 80s. We'll talk about the music industry, entrepreneurship, and what's going on there today. A very interesting story. And then the next day, October 20th, which is a Wednesday, is the second part of our Canadian online conference, where this part will be seeing people like Frank Odea, who is co-founder of Second Cup, and Miles Nadal, and many great folks, including Janet Bannister, that co-founded Kijiji, or I don't know how you guys pronounce that, but something that's very, very known in the Canadian market. So that's going to be fun. And at the end of the month, October 27th, at the World Trade Center, Dell, Rockefeller, Dottie Herman, Russell Indexes, Rihanna's right-hand woman, and loads more. And of course, the Silverstein family at our conference in person at the World Trade Center. So thank you so much for being here.
Denny, thank you. You did a phenomenal job with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And you guys doing a marvelous job. Listen, you're solving the problems that should be solved to make this place, to make this world a better place. So thank you so much. And we'll see you soon.
And thank you all who attended. We really appreciate it. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.